Have you ever wondered why it's so hard to pray? Have you ever felt like every time you decide to pray, something strange happens? Distractions, tiredness, random thoughts? What if I told you that this is no coincidence? Is it spiritual warfare? In today's video, you will hear the impressive story of Jennifer Mathers, a woman hooted for 29 minutes and returned with an urgent message straight from Jesus. You are praying wrong. What she saw on the other side was so shocking that it could change your prayer life forever. Get ready for shocking revelations about the spiritual world, the enemy's strategies against your faith, and the true power behind a simple prayer. Now subscribe to the channel if you love content about near-death experiences, and comment below. From which city or country are you watching this video? We want to meet you. Now take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear, hell doesn't want you to know. My name is Jennifer Lee Mathers. I am a wife, mother of two, and worship leader at Full Life Church in Phoenix, Arizona. Until that Sunday, I thought I understood what prayer was. But that day, I died. Literally. And it was at the exact moment I stopped breathing that Jesus shouted something to me that burned inside me. You are praying wrong. It all started during the second worship service of the morning. I was singing "Break Every Chain," and suddenly I felt like an invisible wall had crashed into my chest. An excruciating pain shot through me and my legs gave out. I fell to the floor in front of the altar in the middle of worship, and everything went black. For exactly 29 minutes, I was clinically dead. The paramedic who attended to me later said that my heart had simply stopped. No vital signs. But in that nothing, I was more alive than I had ever been. What I'm going to tell you now is not symbolic. It's not theological. It's a real spiritual war. And you are in the middle of it, even if you don't see it. In the instant after the darkness, something happened. I was no longer on the church floor. I was standing, but not on the floor. It was as if I were floating, surrounded by a living darkness. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was something watching me. A chill that came not from my body, but from my soul. Suddenly, a light exploded before me. A white, intense flash, with a presence so strong that my spirit knelt even without a body. And then came the scream. You are praying wrong. Jesus' voice echoed like thunder within my being, but the tone was not one of condemnation. It was one of urgency, of sadness mixed with power. And when he spoke, everything around me shook like cracking glass. A crack in space opened, as if the veil between dimensions had been torn apart with a sword. I was pulled through that crack, taken through layers of the spirit world, and he was with me. Not a distant or ethereal Jesus, but alive, full of light, with eyes that spanned centuries. He took my hand, and without moving his lips, he made me understand everything. His every thought was a thunder of revelation within me. Jennifer, he said, you always thought prayer was something you did with your eyes closed, your head bowed, and pretty words, but prayer is war, and you are unarmed. Suddenly, I began to see scenes from my own life. Me in the car, praying in a hurry before picking up the kids. Me at church, praying mechanically, repetitively. Me at home saying, Lord, thank you for the day, while thinking about the dirty dishes. And then he showed what I didn't see. Every time I prayed, even if it was for seconds, the spiritual world was stirring. But the most shocking thing was what I saw when Atui didn't pray. Jesus reached out his hand, and in an instant, my life has become a spiritual battlefield. It wasn't a metaphor. I saw my room, but I also saw dark entities with deformed shapes crawling along the walls, hiding behind furniture, whispering thoughts like, you are tired. It won't make any difference if you pray now. Leave it for tomorrow. And the scariest thing, they weren't there all the time. They came when I decided not to pray. The vision changed. It was like watching a recording on another plane. I saw a specific night when I had felt the urge to pray for my son, Noah. But I was exhausted and said to myself, tomorrow I will pray more calmly. At that time, 3 entities, they approached his room. They carried chains, as if they wanted to chain his thoughts. Anxiety, fear, confusion. And me? I was in the living room on my phone laughing at TikTok videos. Jesus looked at me with sadness, not anger, but a pain so deep that I wanted to disappear. You don't understand, Jennifer. Every time you choose comfort over prayer, a gap opens up, and the enemy knows this. Then he showed otherwise. One morning, late, I muttered quickly, "Lord, protect my children today." It was a 5-second prayer. But in the spirit world, that was like an explosion of light. A shockwave went through my neighborhood. Angels took a stand. The darkness retreated, screaming, burning, as if it had been hit by invisible fire. And at that moment, Jesus spoke what changed everything. It's not time. It's faith. It's not eloquence. It's intention. Do you still think you need feel like to pray? They count on it. Jesus snapped his fingers, and like a curtain falling on a stage, the scene changed again. I was taken to a place that looked like a war room, a kind of infernal command center. There were dozens, perhaps hundreds of entities there, deformed, cunning, moving pieces on a spiritual board. They didn't scream, they didn't flap their wings. They planned. On the wall was a spiritual map of the United States. Lights and shadows moved as the prayers of the Christians rose, or stopped. And then I heard Kreutzer 15M prayer, neutralized with cell phone distraction. Attempted intercession, interrupted with notification of work. Texas woman almost prayed for her kids. We reminded her of dirty dishes. Jennifer Mathers, distracted by worries about finances, did not pray. They knew my name, and Jesus made me hear what they feared most. A demon looked at a monitor and growled. She prayed his name. The name. Reinforce it now. She mentioned the blood. In the background, I saw what happened when a Christian prayed with faith. It was as if the floor of hell cracked. Their boards fell apart. They screamed, covering their ears. The shadows dispersed like smoke blown away by a holy wind. Then a brutal revelation. The prayer of faith is the only thing we cannot copy or infiltrate. That is why we do everything possible to ensure that it never happens. Jesus looked at me and said, "They don't fear worship. They don't fear choirs. They don't fear events. But a woman alone in a room, with her knee on the floor and the name Jesus on her lips, they tremble." I saw hell tremble, literally, because of a prayer I said without even remembering it properly. Jesus then showed me a moment in my life that I had forgotten. It was one morning, 3 years ago, when my marriage was hanging by a thread. I cried, in the bathroom with my head against the cold wall, and all I could say was, "Jesus, I can't take it anymore, help me." That prayer, so broken, so whispered, caused a convulsion in the spiritual world. I saw the floor of hell rip right down the middle. The demons that were fueling division between me and my husband were thrown back as if they had been hit by light missiles. An angel appeared with a flaming sword and cut the chains that were binding us. But the most shocking thing was to see that I never knew that. I thought that prayer had been weak, desperate, without strength. And it was there that Jesus showed me the most effective lie in hell. If they believe their prayers are weak, they stop. And when they stop, we move forward. Jesus pointed to another scene. Me praying for my son, quietly, in the car. That's all. But spiritually, a golden shield formed around him. I saw an accident being diverted. I saw a panic attack being canceled. And I didn't even know. I had only prayed because I felt troubled in my heart. And then came the sentence that burned inside me like liquid fire. No sincere prayer is wasted. Not one. The mistake was not that I prayed little. The mistake was to believe that if I didn't felt power, there was no power. Hell does not fear your feelings, it fears your faith. Jesus then led me to see something that broke my heart. The prayers I didn't say. Each of them was represented by an unlit candle on a white altar. But what hurt the most was what was happening around these unlit candles, like holes of darkness that spread. I have seen situations where a simple prayer would have changed destinations. A coworker, Sarah, was struggling with severe depression. One morning I felt like praying for her, but I thought, oh, she'll think it's weird. In the vision I saw what would have happened: angels moving, veils of darkness breaking, thoughts of suicide being canceled. But since the prayer never came, none of that happened. And then Jesus said to me, "The prayer you don't say is an opportunity that hell takes advantage of." The pain of this was unbearable. I saw children growing up in spiritually unprotected homes. I saw marriages falling apart because of a lack of intercession. I saw churches that started out full of prayer and ended up full of distractions. "Look at this," Jesus said, and showed me scenes of believers with Bibles in hand, but no time to pray. They read promises but didn't activate any. They knew verses, but they did not speak to the author. "What about hell?" He applauded silently. I saw demons celebrating when Christians said, "I'm too tired to pray today. We'll pray better tomorrow. I'll just watch one episode and then I'll pray." They don't need to stop you from praying violently. Just distract, postpone, and the plan of darkness remains intact. That's when Jesus said something I'll never forget. The greatest theft of hell is not sin, it is lost prayer time. The scene changed once more. Now Jesus took me to what appeared to be a spiritual arsenal, a place where the prayers of the saints became weapons, not symbolic but real. Every sincere prayer, even the simplest, became a spear of light, a flaming sword, a golden shield. I saw what happened when someone prayed in the name of Jesus with faith. Those weapons flew to spiritual battlefields and schools, hospitals, houses, roads, prisons, churches, and destroyed demonic fortresses built decades ago. Jesus pointed to a gigantic weapon made of pure white light. This was generated by a prayer from an illiterate grandmother, kneeling on the dirt floor, praying for her grandchildren. She didn't even know if she was saying the right words, but she prayed with all her heart. I saw this weapon hit a dark structure. It looked like a skyscraper of darkness, and that thing collapsed like a melting mountain. Jesus then showed me another scene, a pastor praying for revival in a forgotten little town in the countryside. No one saw fruits in the natural. But in the spiritual world, the darkness was receding kilometer by kilometer. "Jennifer," he said, "you think prayer is something weak, invisible, abstract, but in heaven and in hell, prayer is ammunition, it is fire, it is earthquake, it is divine dynamite." I also saw when prayers were said coldly out of obligation, these became weak, unstable, without direction. But a drop of faith was enough, and those same prayers lit up like fiery arrows. And then he said something to me that made me sob. Hell trembles when a Christian discovers what really happens when he prays. Jesus then led me to one last scenario, the darkest one. It was like a laboratory from hell. There, the demons weren't just planning distractions. They were fabricating mental arguments. I saw entities blowing thoughts into the minds of Christians. "You are not worthy. You don't know how to pray. There is no point in praying for it again. God is busy with bigger things. You have sinned too much to be heard." Every sentence was like spiritual poison dripping straight into people's faith. But the most impressive thing was what Jesus showed me next. Every time someone believed these lies and stopped praying, a sound would echo in the spirit world. A horrible sound, the sound of silence. It wasn't peace. It was assilence of defeat. An absence that gave permission. Where God's people were silent, hell rose. I saw entire neighborhoods with heavy, oppressive atmospheres because the voices of the believers had fallen silent. And then, Jesus showed me children in schools being tormented by fear, confusion, and thoughts of death, while their mothers, believers, scrolled through their cell phone feed saying, "I'll pray later." The enemy's greatest attack is not persecution. It is distraction. If he can keep you silent, he's already won half the battle. I also saw how prayers of repentance, even after long periods of sin, exploded like nuclear bombs in the kingdom of darkness. A man who prayed, "God, forgive me, I don't want to live like this anymore," did more harm to hell than 1,000 theological discussions. And then Jesus spoke like a war commander. Return to prayer. Return to war. Return to using the weapon that the enemy fears most, your voice full of faith crying out my name. Jesus then took me to one last place, and it was incredibly beautiful. It looked like a golden living net, pulsing like a gigantic heart that stretched across the planet. Each thread of that net was a prayer made in faith. Some were thick and strong, made by fervent intercessors. Others were thin and trembling, coming from broken hearts. But all of them interconnected. "This is the body in prayer," Jesus said. "And the more you pray, the more impossible it becomes for hell to advance." I saw the network protect entire cities, neighborhoods in spiritual warfare being covered by shields of light. I saw families who didn't even know Jesus yet being preserved because of the prayers of distant relatives. I saw an 86-year-old woman praying alone in a nursing home, and her prayer interfering with a suicide attempt in another state. I cried out in tears, "Is it possible for all this to happen with a prayer?" Jesus looked at me with fire in his eyes and replied, "This is why the enemy tries to convince you that praying is a waste of time." And then he showed me something that took my breath away. My own children years ahead serving God. But what struck me was the caption floating over that view. "Protected by the prayers you haven't even said yet." My spirit burst into tears. I saw eternity being shaped by words that were still trapped inside me. Jesus concluded by saying, "Prayer is not a routine, it is a legacy. It is the bridge between today and what the Father has already written. Hell tries to break the net, but as long as there is one soul praying with faith, he cannot do it." Then, in the most firm, authoritative voice I have ever heard, Jesus turned to me, eyes like living fire, and said, "Jennifer, go back and tell them, they are praying wrong. Because they are giving up on praying. Say that hell fears a simple prayer more than 1,000 beautiful words without faith. Tell me and I'll listen, always." At the same moment, I felt a force pulling my spirit back. Everything around me began to dissolve. The light, the golden net, the spiritual battlefields. My soul was still screaming, "I don't want to leave, I need to see more, I need to understand more." But Jesus said to me, "You've seen enough to change a generation." Then he reached out and touched my chest. In that second, I returned to my body with an explosive jet of air. The doctors screamed. I heard someone say, "She's back, she's back." Afterwards, they told me I had been dead for 29 minutes and 12 seconds. No heartbeat, no breathing, and no explanation. But I know the truth. I was called back with a mission to awaken God's children to the invisible war. Today, every prayer I say, even the short ones, even the whispered ones, I see in the spirit like a sword cutting through walls, like thunder tearing through dark clouds. I never pray the same way again. Now I know, let hell tremble when a mother prays for her son. That demons are cast down when one says Jesus in faith. That no sincere prayer is too small. What this why? Time you spend praying is what defines what remains standing in your life. Do you think you are praying wrong? Maybe the error is to stop. Maybe hell is doing everything it can to convince you that there is no point, precisely because it is, afraid of what will happen if you continue. Get back to praying, now. Don't wait any longer, because if you saw what I saw, you would never keep heaven waiting for your voice again. If you like this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.